The morning light filtered through the tall courtroom windows, catching flecks of dust that floated in the air like silent witnesses. The room buzzed softly, murmurs from waiting defendants, the shuffle of papers, the faint echo of heels across the polished floor. Then the heavy wooden door creaked open. A young woman stepped inside, her expression already hardened by the weight of a bad morning. She didn't walk. She charged forward, chin high, lips pressed into a line that dared anyone to speak to her. The bailiff nodded toward the defense table, but she crossed her arms and stood where she was. Judge Caprio looked up from his bench, adjusting his glasses slowly. "Good morning," he said, his voice even and warm. She didn't respond, only rolled her eyes and let out a breath sharp enough to cut through the silence. The clerk began reading her citation, but the woman wasn't listening. Her fingers drummed on her arm faster and faster, her foot tapping impatiently against the tile. The tension built like static in the air. When her name was called, she finally stepped forward. "You're here for an unpaid parking ticket," Caprio began. "Do you understand the charge?" She shrugged. "Yeah, I got it." Her tone dripped with defiance. The audience in the gallery exchanged glances, the kind of glances that said, "She's going to regret that." Caprio remained still, eyes steady, his calm presence a wall she couldn't climb. He spoke again, measured, patient. "Ma'am, this is your opportunity to explain." Before he could finish, she threw her hands up. "Explain what? That you people just love making my life harder?" Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotion beneath the anger. The courtroom froze. Caprio's gaze didn't waver. "Please, take a breath," he said softly. "We're not here to fight." But she wasn't hearing him anymore. In one sudden, reckless motion, she raised her hand, middle finger pointed high, and held it there for half a second too long. A collective gasp filled the room. The bailiff stiffened, unsure whether to move or wait for the judge's signal. The clerk stopped typing. Even the ceiling fan seemed to pause mid-turn. Caprio didn't move. He simply set his pen down, folding his hands together. His expression was unreadable, not anger, not shock, just a heavy human stillness. The silence stretched on, unbearable. The woman's defiance faltered under the weight of it. Her hand trembled slightly as she lowered it. Somewhere in the back row, a cough broke the tension, echoing like thunder in the quiet hall. Caprio finally spoke, voice low and calm. "Are you finished, ma'am?" The words were simple, but they carried the authority of decades. A voice that didn't need to shout to be heard. She looked down, suddenly aware of the room watching her, of her own pulse pounding in her ears. Caprio leaned back, his eyes softening just a fraction. The moment lingered, the kind that changes the course of a day, or perhaps a life. Judge Caprio didn't flinch. He simply leaned back in his chair, the faint creak of wood echoing through the stillness. The courtroom was suspended in silence, a heavy, fragile kind of quiet that demanded attention. He reached up slowly, lowering his glasses with one hand and setting them gently on the desk. His gaze met hers, calm but unyielding. "Ma'am," he began softly, "do you know what that gesture means?" His voice wasn't angry. It carried the tone of a teacher or a father trying to guide a lost child back to reason. The woman shifted her weight, her defiance trembling beneath the surface. "Yeah, I know what it means," she muttered, her voice brittle. "It means nothing. It means people don't respect me anyway. So why should I respect them?" Her words came out sharp, but her eyes flickered, a split second of something raw and unguarded. The spectators exchanged subtle glances, sensing that this was no ordinary courtroom exchange. Caprio didn't interrupt. He simply folded his hands together, elbows resting on the bench, and let her speak. The space between them filled with her words, frustration spilling into the air like steam escaping from a long boiling pot. "You all think you know people like me," she continued, her voice rising and falling, trembling between anger and exhaustion. "You see the attitude, the yelling, but you don't see what's behind it. No one listens unless I shout." Her voice cracked. She looked down quickly, hiding it, but the tremor in her hand betrayed her. Caprio's expression softened. "I'm listening now," he said quietly. The simple phrase cut through the noise in her head, a sentence so gentle it disarmed her completely. The woman blinked, caught off guard. No one had said those words to her in a long time. He leaned forward slightly. "You know," he said, "my father used to tell me, when you lose your temper, you lose your case. But when you speak your truth calmly, people finally hear you." His tone carried warmth, but also a quiet authority that filled the room. The woman exhaled, her shoulders lowering as if something inside her finally gave up the fight. The courtroom watched, spellbound, as the tension transformed into something almost tender. The judge's composure, his patience, stood in perfect contrast to the woman's unraveling defenses. For the first time since she entered, she didn't seem angry, just tired. She brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, "It's been a hard year." Caprio nodded gently, as if he already knew. "Sometimes," he said, "the hardest battles aren't fought in courtrooms." His words hung in the air, landing somewhere between truth and mercy. The woman looked up at him, her eyes red but searching, and for a fleeting second, the distance between judge and defendant disappeared. Judge Caprio leaned slightly forward, his voice carrying that quiet steadiness that filled the entire courtroom without ever rising. "Ma'am," he began gently, "tell me what's been going on in your life." The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment, as if giving her permission to breathe for the first time in weeks. She blinked, caught between defiance and exhaustion, her lip trembling before she caught it with her teeth. "Nothing's going on," she muttered. "Just life being life." Caprio didn't push. He simply waited, eyes soft, hands folded, patience radiating from every inch of him. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was compassionate. She looked up and for the first time saw not a judge, but a man willing to listen. Her voice cracked as she exhaled, I'm a single mother." The words came out fragile, almost ashamed. "Got 2 kids. Their dad left last year. Rent went up. I tried to keep up, but..." She paused, swallowing hard, trying to steady herself. "Last month they evicted us. We're staying at my sister's place, all 4 of us in one room." A murmur spread through the courtroom, the kind of human reaction that can't be contained. Caprio's eyes lowered for a moment. He didn't speak, just nodded softly, giving her space to continue. "I work 2 jobs now," she said, voice trembling. "Mornings at the diner, nights at the gas station. I barely see my kids. I'm just trying." Her hands clenched into fists, resting on the podium. "Then I get this ticket. I parked outside the school for 5 minutes, just 5, to drop off breakfast because my son didn't eat. And now I'm here like some criminal." Her words dissolved into tears she could no longer hold back. The courtroom, moments ago filled with judgmental eyes, now felt like a sanctuary. Even the bailiff, stoic and still, lowered his gaze. Caprio removed his glasses, setting them down gently on the bench, his voice trembling with quiet compassion. "You've been fighting battles no one sees, haven't you?" The woman nodded, unable to speak. Caprio leaned closer, his tone a whisper that carried the weight of decades of understanding. "Sometimes," he said, "life doesn't wait for you to rest. It keeps coming and you keep standing. But you don't have to fight every war alone." His words wrapped around her like warmth in a cold room. The woman wiped her tears, trying to steady her breath. Caprio's expression remained calm, almost reflective, as he glanced briefly toward the audience, then back to her. The tension that once filled the courtroom had melted into empathy. For the first time she wasn't on trial, she was being seen. Judge Caprio sat quietly for a moment, his hands resting on the bench, eyes lowered as if searching for the right words in the stillness. When he finally spoke, his tone was calm, steady like a gentle tide returning to shore. "You know," he began, "respect isn't earned through fear or by being louder than everyone else in the room. It's earned through understanding, through how we treat one another, even when life feels unfair." His voice carried no hint of reprimand, only a kind of wisdom that seemed to soften the air around them. The woman looked up, her eyes still red but clearer now. Caprio continued, "When you walked in here today, you were angry. I could see it. You felt cornered, maybe even disrespected by the world. But that gesture..." He paused, lifting his hand slightly, mimicking her earlier motion without judgment. "That gesture doesn't protect you. It closes doors that might have opened to help you." His words landed gently but firmly, each one finding its mark. She lowered her gaze, fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. The courtroom was silent, even the spectators leaning forward as if afraid to breathe too loudly. "Sometimes," Caprio said softly, "when we feel the world has been unkind, we start believing that kindness itself doesn't exist. But I promise you, it does. It just waits for you to let it back in." The woman swallowed hard, blinking back tears that refused to stay hidden. "I didn't mean," she started, her voice cracking. Caprio lifted a hand slightly, stopping her. Not to silence, but to comfort. "I know you didn't," he said. "Anger doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you've been carrying too much for too long." His gaze lingered, compassionate and unshaken. "But what defines you," he added, "is what you do when someone shows you grace." A hush spread through the room. The woman's chest rose and fell, her breath shaky. For the first time, she looked at the judge not as an authority figure, but as a mirror, reflecting back her own humanity. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely audible. Caprio nodded, eyes softening. "That's where respect begins," he said. "Not with fear, not with punishment, but with honesty. With moments like this." He leaned slightly forward, his voice lowering to a near whisper. "You see, ma'am, life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. What matters most is how we respond when someone reaches out a hand instead of pointing a finger." The words hung in the air, deep and deliberate. The woman wiped her cheeks, a faint nod escaping her as if something within her had finally yielded. Around the courtroom, heads turned toward Caprio, not in awe, but in quiet gratitude for witnessing something deeply human. He adjusted his glasses again, eyes lingering on the woman's softened expression. "You're listening now," he said gently, almost to himself. "That's a good start." Judge Caprio took a slow breath, his gaze drifting toward the courtroom ceiling as if replaying a distant memory. When he spoke, his tone softened, each word carrying the quiet weight of experience. "You know," he began, "my father came to this country with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. He couldn't speak the language, couldn't read the signs, but he believed in respect, believed that how you treat people matters more than what's in your wallet." The woman looked up, her tear-streaked face caught in the light. Caprio's voice deepened slightly, the rhythm of his story pulling everyone in. "I remember walking down the street with him when I was just a boy," he continued. "A man I'll never forget. I mocked his accent, laughed at the way he spoke. I was angry, embarrassed. I wanted my father to say something back, to stand up for himself." He paused, eyes glinting behind his glasses. But he didn't. He just smiled, nodded, and said, "Have a nice day, sir." The courtroom was still. Even the hum of the lights seemed to fade. Caprio leaned forward, his elbows resting gently on the bench. Later that night, I asked him why he didn't fight back. You know what he told me? The woman shook her head faintly, barely breathing. He said, "Son, never let someone else's ugliness change who you are." A hush fell deeper over the room. The words lingered, not as a sermon, but as something sacred. "My father was a man who faced humiliation more times than I can count," Caprio said softly. "But he never once disrespected another soul. And you know what? People remembered that. They remembered his kindness. Because real strength..." He paused, eyes meeting hers. "Real strength comes from patience and compassion, not pride." The woman's eyes welled up again, her lips trembling as she tried to look away but couldn't. She wasn't seeing a judge now. She was seeing a man who had lived through struggle, who knew what it meant to be small in a world that didn't always play fair. Her defenses melted. The hardness in her posture disappeared, replaced by quiet remorse. Caprio's voice lowered to a whisper, almost as if he were speaking only to her. "You remind me of my mother," he said. "She carried everything on her shoulders, too. Worked, worried, sacrificed. But she never forgot who she was. Don't let the world take that from you." The woman lowered her head, shoulders shaking, one tear landing softly on the edge of the podium. The moment was so tender, so still, it felt as though the entire courtroom was holding its breath. Caprio didn't rush her. He simply sat back, letting the silence say what words no longer needed to. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the overhead lights filled the silence, a soft reminder that time was still moving even when hearts felt frozen. The woman stood at the podium, eyes fixed on the floor, her breathing uneven. When she finally looked up, her expression had changed. No anger now, only a fragile honesty breaking through. "Judge," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm sorry." The words came out trembling, unfinished, like she was still learning how to say them. "Not just for what I did here today, but for everything." Caprio didn't move, only nodded slightly, his eyes calm and listening. She continued, her hands twisting together nervously. "I've been angry for so long. At the system, at people, at myself. I keep telling everyone I'm fine, that I'm strong, but I'm not." Her voice cracked mid-sentence and she pressed her lips together, forcing the emotion back down. "I'm tired, Your Honor. I feel like I've lost control of my life." The courtroom was utterly still. Even those who had come in for their own cases seemed to forget why they were there. The woman's confession hung in the air like a fragile truth, raw, unpolished, and heartbreakingly real. Caprio leaned forward slightly, his tone soft but firm, the kind that makes people believe in redemption. "It takes strength," he said slowly, "to admit that." Her shoulders trembled as a single tear slid down her cheek. "I don't even know how to fix it anymore," she whispered. Caprio gave a small smile, not of amusement, but of recognition. "You don't fix life," he said, "you live through it. One good choice at a time, starting now." She looked at him, unsure how to respond, and for the first time, he smiled. A warm, disarming gesture that made even the marble walls seem gentler. "You've already taken the hardest step," he added. "You stopped pretending." The woman nodded faintly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Her voice was quieter now, steadier. "I don't want to be that person anymore," she said. "The one who lashes out at everyone just because I'm hurting." Caprio tilted his head, his tone almost fatherly. "Then don't," he said. "You get to decide who you'll be when you walk out that door." He paused, letting the words find their way to her heart. "Let's see if we can turn this around." The woman's lips quivered, half a smile, half a sob, and the room, still silent, seemed to exhale with her. Judge Caprio sat back for a moment, looking over the papers in front of him as if weighing something greater than a traffic violation. Then he placed them down, folded his hands, and met the woman's eyes with a calm, steady warmth. "You've been through enough," he said softly. "This court is not here to punish someone who's already carrying more than they can bear." His words drifted through the room like a breeze, quiet but powerful. The woman blinked, unsure if she heard him correctly. Caprio continued, his voice low but resonant. "I'm dismissing this case. The fine is gone. You owe the city nothing." A soft gasp escaped her lips, a mixture of relief and disbelief. Her hands trembled as she brought them to her face. "Judge, you don't have to," she started, but he gently raised a hand to stop her. "I know I don't have to," he said, a faint smile touching his face. "But sometimes justice isn't about the law. It's about mercy. And mercy," he added, leaning forward, "is the law of the heart." The courtroom fell utterly silent. Even those waiting for their own cases looked moved, as if witnessing something sacred. Caprio gestured slightly toward her. I'm going to connect you with a local community center. They help single parents find support, financial aid, and even legal assistance. You don't need to face this alone anymore. The woman nodded through tears, her voice breaking as she whispered, Thank you. I don't know how to... He interrupted gently. You don't have to thank me. Just promise me something. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. Don't let anger guide your days. Let dignity lead your way. Her tears spilled freely now. The words struck deep, echoing through every part of her that had forgotten what hope felt like. Caprio smiled faintly, reaching for his gavel but not striking it yet. You walked in here today feeling defeated, he said, but you're leaving with something stronger than victory. You're leaving with a chance. A quiet applause rippled through the courtroom, not loud, but heartfelt, like the sound of a community exhaling together. The woman wiped her eyes, unable to stop smiling through her tears. Caprio nodded once more, the softness in his eyes saying what words no longer needed to. The woman gathered her things with trembling hands, her tears still glistening but different now, lighter, freer. As she turned to leave, she caught Judge Caprio's gaze one last time. He gave her a small nod, one that said, You're going to be okay. She smiled faintly through her tears before stepping out into the hallway, the heavy courtroom doors closing softly behind her. For a long moment, silence lingered, not the uneasy silence from earlier, but a peaceful one, filled with quiet reflection. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, eyes still fixed on the space where she had stood. The murmur of the courtroom began to rise again, but he raised a hand gently, signaling for calm. Before we move on, he said softly, I want everyone here to remember something. His voice carried the warmth of someone who had seen both the best and worst in people, and still believed in their goodness. When someone lashes out, when they act in anger or disrespect, it's not always about the moment you see. Sometimes it's about 100 moments you didn't. He paused, adjusting his glasses as his eyes swept across the room. You never know what battle someone's fighting, he continued. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they've lost something or someone. Maybe the world's been unkind for far too long. The crowd sat still, some nodding, others staring quietly at the floor. The judge's tone softened even more, the kind of voice that could make even the hardest hearts listen. But kindness, he said, costs nothing, and it can change everything. He looked toward the camera now, his gaze steady. His words meant, not just for the courtroom, but for every viewer who might one day find themselves in a similar moment. Sometimes, he said, all someone needs is a little kindness to find their way again. The camera lingered on his face, a portrait of wisdom and humanity intertwined. Then, slowly, the light seemed to fade around him, leaving only the soft glow on his thoughtful expression. The sound of distant footsteps echoed faintly, one woman walking toward a new beginning, guided not by judgment but by grace.